Hello, just a heads up, there's a bit of a false start in this video. When I did the first video, I suddenly realised, what happened to Reuter's house? I forgot about Reuter's house. So, I forgot I'd been standing underneath it while I was filming the Daily Express building opposite. So, I went back and just did a quick bit of footage of Reuter's house for you. I put it in at the start of this video, and then I start the video as traditionally as I normally do. Okay, so that explains the slightly odd format of this one. Hope you enjoy it. Bye. Alright, while I was talking about the Express building, I almost forgot to mention this one. Another big news agency building. This was Reuters. I think that was until the early 2000s. Basically, this was the Reuters office, and that's the Statue of Fame just above the doorway there. With the trumpet obviously spreading the word far and wide. Okay, so I forgot to mention that when I was wandering around, so I just thought I'd stick it in here. Alright then, let's go. Hello and welcome to part 2 of our videos looking at the publishing history of Fleet Street. We finished part 1 at the top of Whitefriar Street, and rather than just sort of filming me walking down the street with a lot of construction around it, I thought we'll finish there and then pick up and then come back up part 2 here at the bottom. And the reason that we're starting here is because of this building. This is Northcliffe House, and as you can see the lettering just along there. It says Northcliffe, very Art Deco-y sort of Egyptian feel to it. And this was the headquarters of the Daily Mail, owned by a certain Lord Northcliffe, hence the name Northcliffe House. So you can see that lions were a big motif for the Art Deco thing. You've got one at the top of every pillar here, but it's got the same sort of feel about it as the Daily Telegraph building, you know, very sort of solid. Lots of concrete. And if we go at the front entrance, we get a little hint of its name, but it's obviously do with the clean. Just there it says Northcliffe House. And as I say, that was owned by a big newspaper magnate at the turn of the last century. Lord Northcliffe, very influential man. Especially influential at the time during the First World War and that sort of thing. But the fact that he owned the Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror, like completely chalk and cheese in terms of their output. Daily Mail certainly today very right wing. The Daily Mirror would be the working man's left wing newspaper. This pub on the right, the Harrow, is a listed building, and this was one of the pubs that a lot of the publishers and newspapermen would have frequented. It seems to have been very territorial, which makes sense. You know, different offices would sort of tend to frequent the same pubs, and you know, they sort of became yours almost by the fact that it was only your guys that tended to drink in them. And I dare say the rival papers wouldn't have bothered unless they were wanting to cooperate on something. So this is the back of Northcliffe House, and here I give you a bit of a history of the building. It being built, says there, don't know if you can see that, the writing's not very clear. Daily Mail and the Weekly Dispatch is what it says there. More pictures of the building, and then some pictures of the massive wood press there. And it says the building was completed 1927. At the time it was built, it was described as having an Egyptian style. It made use of critical minimalist W20 section galvanized steel windows. Well, we all know about those. Crittles is based out my way, out where I live now, out towards Braintree direction. Crittles factory. I think they're more based with them now, but historically, at the time this was being built, that's where they would have been. And here we have more pictures of the various presses, different levels. Some of these big buildings, like the Telegraph in here and whatnot, some of them would have went down 2 or 3 floors in the basement. And you can see why with these massive machines. They would have been printing all night. So that's just some photos from the back of Northcliffe. And then we're going to nip up round this way. Again, more development. This was once a very prestigious legal office. I believe they've moved elsewhere now. But one of the top legal offices in London. But here we have Magpie Alley. And here it gives basically a history of printing in and around Fleet Street. So you can see Daily Telegraph building, 1929. Some pictures of the printing presses in Northcliffe House. Early morning at W.H. Smith and Sons newspapers, 1930. W.H. Smith newsagents was all around the place until just a couple of years ago. They would add one on most high streets, but most of them have gone now. They're based in airports and that sort of thing, but nowhere near as prevalent on the high street as they used to be. That's some building, the one above it. That one, that's obviously not there anymore. Cassell, Petter and Calpin Publishers, Fleet Street, 1875. That's quite a place. This one, the Illustrated London News, 1865. And then, if you love to laugh, read The Artful Dodger. A new paper, price, which must have been the R's gone, 2p, or tuppence as it would have been said. The Artful Dodger. So that must have been at the time whenever Charles Dickens, he would serialise some of his books in the papers. And then obviously that was a good way of getting people to buy the book. Inauguration of the new offices in 1882. Fleet Street, 1890. I don't know how well you can see this because of the light shining off it. There's Fleet Street in 1890 at the bottom one. And then Fleet Street with a view of St Paul's at the top of it in 1900. The Daily Telegraph, 1848 in Fleet Street. Price 3D. Is what it says on the picture. And then we start looking back down to the previous offices of the Telegraph in 1890 with a huge clock outside again. And then we start looking at the printing presses and that sort of thing. Various types. And there's a map or a picture of Fleet Street, 1860. Well, from the bottom, we started at the top up by St Paul's, and then coming down Ludgate Circus, and then there's the Punch Tavern, Shoe Lane, Daily Telegraph, all that coming down this way. And we're going to finish off around about there. So we're sort of more than halfway. And then there's various things about the printing press. And it starts off with Caxton showing the first specimen of his printing to King Edward IV at the Almonry, wherever that was. And then it's got pictures of people selling this sort of broadsheets. It'll be probably just one page at times in the early days. So there you go. So that's Magpie Alley. Give me a history of printing there. And then we come out into Bouverie Street, and on Bouverie Street they used to print the Sun and the News of the World. I'm not sure where the offices were. The Sun is obviously still going strong. News of the World shut down some years ago due to its dodgy practices with phone hacking and the like, and being repeatedly sued. They decided to cheaper to just lose the paper. I think it was the oldest running paper in the world at the time, if memory serves, but they've decided to cut their losses. And of course it was Rupert Murdoch that owned them. Still does, on the Sun. And it was Rupert Murdoch's appearance on the scene that really led to the end of Fleet Street, because in the 1980s he moved his printing operations from here up to Wapping in the East End, which was somewhat cheaper, and he also computerized it, so there was less staff, a lot less overheads, made more money, and he didn't have to worry about strikes so much because of the computerization. So over the years that followed, the rest of Fleet Street did the same thing, because obviously it paid to, it made them more money as a way of keeping the businesses going, because especially with the advent of social media 20 years later, the press is very much on the back foot, and a lot of them struggle to survive. So it's obviously a very labour-intensive business. Now, you can see here we have a whole wall devoted to what used to be printed here. The Republican, the Pall Mall Gazette, the Morning Post, the News Chronicle, the Daily Herald. The Daily Herald was the forerunner of the Sun. That's what it used to be called. And then there is a little information. Well, a lot of information. So if you're really into your newspaper history, there's a website here. So the Heritage of Fleet Street, 80 pages here, online and shortly on audio. I don't know when this would put up. The Heritage of Fleet Street. Exhibition sponsored by Fleet Street Quarter. So you can find it on www.fleetstreetheritage.co.uk. So if you're wanting to know more, this is obviously the place you can find it, online. And if you're wanting to see more videos about the history of London, don't forget to subscribe. Okay, now I'm going to nip over here because I was hoping to get more of these courtyard plaques. So let me see what I can get without getting run over. There we go. Bolt Court. The Sun, he was alone in 42, King Elvis dead. Tuesday the 15th of September 1964, the Sun was launched to replace the Daily Herald, first printed at Bouverie Street, which we just walked out of, south of Fleet Street. Okay. Alright then. Let's go over here. One of the buildings I was going to talk about has been knocked down, Maybe they'll keep the facade. I don't know if you can see on the picture, it's a bit faint, the picture on of the building that used to be there. They might keep the facade once all this construction work is done. Sometimes, a lot of the times, that's what they do as a sop to people who don't like old buildings getting knocked down. They knock down all of it apart from the front bit and then leave that there. But anyway, this was the Scotsman, and this was I believe, the first paper that was based here that wasn't based in London, if you see what I mean. It was like its main office would have been elsewhere, but it opened a London office here. It was the first non-London newspaper to do that. So as I say, it's gone now, but there is another Scottish paper with offices here, or did have, and we can see it. Oh, hold on. First of all, we have got another courtyard plaque, and it's actually my favourite. So here we go. I remember being a bit amazed the first time I saw this. So, St Dunstan's Court. 1980s, new computerised printing technology brought about the demise of the traditional Fleet Street printing press. So, what better way to show computerisation in the 80s than Space Invaders, which was all the rage at the time, which I can attest to, because when I was, early 20s, I used to play it a lot. So, there's that. And then across the street, I did say there was another Scottish office. This one, again, quite Art Deco-y. The Glasgow Herald office. The sort of rust-coloured paint sort of catches your eye. But the other thing that's quite flash is just above the first level of, the painting, there's a couple of statues or sort of reliefs. The one on the left is the Scottish Saltire or flag. The one on the right is the land, which I'm assuming goes with Robert the Bruce. So, and then just above them, or just beneath them, sorry, there are 6 Lion's heads. So I'm assuming that's tying in with the Bruce theme. But again, really nice building. Definitely Art Deco-y to my mind. And it's the colour of the paint that really catches your eye. Who else would, what else would colour a place in rust colour? Not the most common. Now we have another courtyard plaque. And some rubbish to go with it. There we go. So, from 1748 to 1759, Dr. Johnson lived and worked in these courts, where he compiled his famous A Dictionary of the English Language. And then there's a sort of excerpt from it there. Obviously, when we did Fleet Street and we were looking at the general history, not the newspaper history, we visited the courtyard where Dr. Johnson's house is. And here we have another one. Lots of these little courtyards. This one's quite pretty. I think I remember going up there just because it is so pretty. Here we go. Red Lion Court. In 1816, William Caslon IV produced the first sans serif printing type popularised by printers like R. Taylor, who worked in this court. So there you go. Those are your fonts and typography. There's a bit of history for you there. This one. Crane Court. The Daily Current. Wednesday, 7th March 11th, I think, 1702. Oh yeah, so Wednesday, 11th of March 1702, the first edition of the Daily Current was published in Fleet Street, Britain's first daily newspaper. And I think I mentioned about that earlier, that what it would do was it would take stories from around the world and then put them all in one place. And to start with, all just on one page. And then, you know, you sell them for a penny a time. Now, a couple of things to mention here. First one is, behind that traffic light, it says El Vino. And I should point out that this is, it's got new ownership since these events happened. But this was one of those pubs, a lot of the, one of the certain newspapers, can't remember which one it was, but this was their drinking hole, okay? But it was obviously very misogynist, because apparently women couldn't even go up to the bar and ask for a drink. It was that bad. Until 1982, when a female journalist took them to court and won. So obviously somewhat backward thinking, or maybe it was just very typical of the time. But like I say, different owners now, so don't hold them to blame. And then next to it, up there, it says London News Agency, and this was a text and photo agency. So it would have done, I suppose, clippings. I suppose if, let's say, somebody died and you needed a photo of them and maybe a bit of text about their life that you could, you know, pick out from various articles over the years, this would have been the sort of place you would have got it from. Okay, I dare say they did other stuff, but obituaries is the first thing that springs to mind for me. Now, how we doing? Oh, battery's getting low. Good job, we're near the end. Our last courtyard, hen and chicken courts. This is where a Sweeney Todd was supposed to have been. We talked about that in the Fleet Street video. So Friday the 8th of June 1855, the Sheffield Daily Telegraph was launched and was the first British paper to have a dedicated telegraph line. Well, there you go. Next to that is this. So this is the offices of D.C. Thompson. Used to have, I can't remember the name of the paper. If I remember, I'll put it in the text. But otherwise, it's the offices of the Beano and the Dandy. But you can see it still has a tie to the past. It's got this lovely old printing press, like one of the sort of the original artifacts. And it's kept it here on display here in the foyer. Now, obviously these days there are so many different ways of doing printing, but it just shows you how much it's developed from an old machine like that to all the computerized software, you know, Adobe, Photoshop, all the rest of the sort of things that you can use now, Canva, you know, to put stuff together yourself. You know, it's come a long way, but this is a nice little sort of throwback to where it all started. So it's that. And I don't know how well we'll be able to see this through the bars. But we talked about the Daily Mail in Northcliffe House, and this is the man himself, Lord Northcliffe. Let's see. So that would be, looks like 1865 to 1922. And this is the bus of Lord Northcliffe here at St Dunstan's in the west, the church. And it's funny because most of the journalists would have been up at St Bride's. That's where a lot of the journalists have got memorials and whatnot up there. But maybe he was a donor here. Who knows? And then you can't really see it here. I can just sort of show you that. That one says J.L. Garvin, 1865, 1947, or 1868, 1947. For 34 years, editor of the, I think it was the Observer. Yes, the Observer. So there's a little plaque to him. So all related to the printing industry. And there's only one more thing to show you, but it's best if we get across the road again without getting run over. And we look up there between DC Thompson and the church. You've got the Sunday Post, People's Friend, People's Journal, Dundee Courier. So these are all Scottish publications. I believe the Sunday Post, I think it still holds it, the Guinness World Record for having the most, sort of the most of a population of one single country reading it. You know, it was read by nearly everybody. I suppose I could tell by the circulation figures. Look at the population, look at my papers yourself. Very big in Scotland and also in Northern Ireland. You know, my home place. But yes, and this is an example of, like, you sort of ask yourself, well, why would a Scottish paper want to have a London office? Like we saw the Scotsman, the Glasgow Herald. No doubt there were others that I'm not aware of. And they all opened offices here on Fleet Street. And my guess, educated guess, would be because you get close to where the big stories are breaking, and then you can do like a local take on it. You would have stringers that would, you know, get stories and then, you know, get them recorded and sent up to the Scottish office. And like I say, they would be able to do a local take on some of the big stories, and maybe, you know, break the same story in a slightly different way. Now, I have personal experience of that one. Hold on. No, I wasn't in a newspaper. When I was in college, one of my college friends, Andy, well, let's get out of people's way.
Accept what he's putting down.
One of my college friends, Andy, he was from Derbyshire. And we went on a drinking weekend up at his place, Chesterfield, which was very nice. But on one of the nights that we went out, he took us to this pub, middle of nowhere, like up in the moors, whatever, really out of the way. So we went to this pub, and it was a bit like an American Werewolf in London, you know, when we walked in, everything went silent and all the locals were looking at you. But we had a very pleasant evening. But one of the things that Andy wanted to show was, up on the wall was an old newspaper framed in a private place, and on it said, "Derby man dies at sea." Everywhere else in the world for that particular event would have reported it as the Titanic has sunk, but they put it as Derby man dies at sea. So to me, that ties in with this. Now, hope you enjoyed the walk. If you did, as I say, feel free to subscribe or let somebody know who might be interested. I try to do them every Sunday, but if you made it this far, thanks for watching. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. I'm not certain where I'm going next. Maybe we'll finish the London Wall. Not sure. Okay, but thanks for watching. Bye.